So here's a thought to start us off. What if earning a really high income doesn't automatically, translate into true wealth? Or maybe more importantly, into lasting happiness and that sort of peace of mind we're all after? What if the real secret to financial freedom isn't just about the size of your paycheck, but something much more fundamental, like your mindset and maybe just a few common sense habits? Today we're taking a deep dive into this fascinating world of financial wisdom. We're focusing specifically on wealth habits, 5 financial wisdoms. And the sources we've looked at for this, they are absolutely packed with incredible insights. We've got real-life stories that might really challenge how you think and some surprisingly actionable advice. Stuff that completely redefines what building lasting wealth actually means.
That's absolutely right. And our mission here today, it isn't just about, stacking up money. It's really about understanding the core principles behind it all, the psychology, the practical common sense that leads to genuine financial freedom. We're going to break down why a high income can sometimes be, well, frankly, an illusion, why so many high earners feel like they're constantly struggling. And then we'll pivot. We'll look at how to make your money work harder for you, starting with something often missed, investing in yourself first. And crucially, we'll talk about the pitfalls, the stupid mistakes, as our sources bluntly put it, that you really need to avoid on your path to financial peace.
Yeah, get ready because we're going to unpack some genuinely surprising facts. You might find yourself reevaluating some long-held beliefs about money, about consumption, about what security really looks like. We want to give you a kind of shortcut here, a way to get well-informed on a topic that, let's face it, touches everyone's life, no matter where you are financially, offering insights that hopefully cut through all the noise and get right to the heart of creating and protecting wealth.
Okay, let's unpack this first idea then. We're going to kick things off with a really striking anecdote from our sources, one that immediately challenges that deep-seated idea that more money automatically means more happiness, or even more wealth, actually. It's a powerful, kind of counterintuitive story to start with, a scenario that might even sound a bit familiar, maybe something you've seen happen around you. Right, so picture this. Our sources highlight this viral social media post. It was from an individual, let's call him Vaibhav, and he was earning a staggering 750,000 units of currency per month. I mean, that is a huge income by any standard, puts him right up there in the top tier. But here's the thing.
In his post, he claimed he struggled to breathe financially. Can you even imagine that? Earning so much, yet feeling completely suffocated by money. Living paycheck to paycheck, not by choice, but feeling obligated to.
It's a real reality check, isn't it? And the sources, they go into the details of Vaibhav's situation. It paints a very clear picture of this paradox. It's almost like a warning. He had these incredibly high monthly loan payments, all tied to a very luxury lifestyle. For instance, 200,000 units of currency every single month, just for the payment on a house valued at 30 million units. That's an immense mortgage.
Right. And on top of that, another 60,000 units per month for a luxury car. The sources even sort of hint that the car was probably chosen for status. The implication being that a more modest car just wouldn't look good parked outside such an expensive house.
Yeah.
So right away, you see this underlying psychological driver.
Yeah.
That pressure to keep up appearances.
Wow. So the house and car loan are already a huge chunk. What else?
Oh, it didn't stop there. His day-to-day living costs were just as lavish, things many people might aspire to, but for him, they were clearly a burden. He was spending 30,000 units monthly just on household staff, a maid, a cook, a driver.
Then another 20,000 units for going out nightclubs, expensive dinners, apparently quite regularly. Add another 12,000 for clothes and, other lifestyle bits and pieces, maybe designer stuff, keeping up with trends. And 15,000 units allocated just for gifts. Which kind of implies this constant need to impress or reciprocate. And then, almost funny if it weren't so concerning, an extra 10,000 units just disappeared into what he called miscellaneous forgotten expenses.
That says a lot about not tracking things carefully, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you add all that up, where does that leave him?
Well, his total committed lifestyle cost, and this is before taxes, was 500,000 units of currency per month. Now remember, he's in the highest income tax bracket, so a very significant slice of that 750,000 income was gone to taxes before he even touched it. This basically meant his entire take-home pay was needed just to cover these huge self-imposed expenses. But the truly alarming part, the real critical omission in his whole setup was his own words. We neither have savings nor do we have insurance.
No savings, no insurance. On that kind of income.
Exactly, a complete lack of any financial safety net. It turned his high income into this incredibly dangerous tightrope walk. No cushion for emergencies, no buffer if anything went wrong, and definitely no actual long-term wealth being built.
And this specific situation, our sources give it a name, don't they?
They do. They call it the wealthy people's disease. It describes this condition where people, despite earning a lot, feel trapped. And ironically, they might actually feel happier if their income was half.
Happier if their income was half.
Why? Because presumably, with a lower income, the crushing societal pressure to maintain that super lavish lifestyle and the burden of all that debt would likely be less. It might allow for a more manageable, maybe a more genuinely enjoyable life.
It's quite a shocking idea, isn't it? That more money could actually lead to more stress, not less.
It really is. So it's not just about the numbers on the payslip. Absolutely not. The sources really drive home this core idea. This situation isn't fundamentally about the income level itself. It's profoundly about mindset. It's about the choices being made. The author of one source asks very directly, if this is truly the situation, whose fault is it? This is a wealthy people's disease, isn't it? Which highlights the phrase, wealth is a game of mindset and common sense. The issue wasn't how much Vaibhav made. It was how he managed, or rather, mismanaged what he had, and critically what he didn't have. The savings, the insurance, the disciplined spending. It seems to be about the choices he made, tying that high income to an equally high, ultimately unsustainable cost of living, maybe all just to project an image of success that hid some deep financial anxiety.
So, okay, what does this mean for you, listening right now? This whole story, it raises a really critical question, right at the heart of financial well-being. Can you actually buy happiness from your money? If you're always feeling constrained by your lifestyle choices, no matter how much you earn. It forces us, I think, to really reconsider what true financial freedom looks like. Is it about what you earn, or is it about what you keep and how wisely you manage it? It's about spotting those psychological traps, isn't it? The ones that can turn a high salary into, well, a kind of golden cage. All right, now here's where things get really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive again. We're going to challenge some pretty deeply ingrained conventional wisdom about investing, especially for people just starting out in their careers, or maybe those on lower incomes right now. We've all heard it, right? That famous quote, usually attributed to Albert Einstein, calling compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. And the advice we always get, drilled into us almost, is start early, start small, let compounding work its magic. And look, on paper, mathematically, if you have a lot of capital or a really long time horizon, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Start earlier, your money compounds for longer. Simple.
It is simple, and the power of compounding over the very long term is undeniable. Absolutely. However, the sources offer a really critical perspective on those early, small, systematic investment plans, SIPs, especially for someone earning, say, around 20,000 to 25,000 units of currency per month. Now, investing a small amount, maybe 2,000 or 2,200 units in an SIP each month, yeah, it might build good financial discipline, good habits, that's valuable. But the sources argue pretty strongly that it won't build substantial wealth quickly. They call it a sad reality. That even if you get decent 12% stock market returns, it takes a full 14 years just to multiply your initial wealth by 10. Now, if you're starting with a really small base, like 2,000 units, well, that's a very, very long time to wait for results that actually change your life in a big way.
14 years to 10x.
Yeah.
Yeah, that puts it in perspective. So there's something else we should be considering.
Exactly. This brings us to a concept that often gets missed, the opportunity cost. What are you actually giving up? What potential are you losing by focusing only on these small, traditional investments when your income is still quite low? The sources argue there's a very big opportunity cost here. You might be, in their words, losing your time and those really valuable early career years. Spending that time on activities that yield minimal real-life wealth compared to other, potentially much more impactful possibilities, like, for example, spending weeks or months trying to research individual stocks or the next big investment trend, which they say is not a sure-shot way of making money, but definitely a sure-shot way of losing your time. The core message is, your time and your potential are actually your most valuable assets when you're starting out.
Okay, so if small, early SIPs aren't necessarily the most efficient path for everyone starting out, what's the alternative they propose?
Well, this is where they unpack what they call the power of self-investment. They basically assert that the single most effective investment you can make in the early stages of your career is actually in yourself.
Investing in yourself. How so?
By actively developing skills that are valuable in the market. By diligently building your professional network. By pursuing education or training that directly boosts your earning potential. This isn't just some, feel-good advice. It's presented very clearly as the best use of your savings at this specific crucial stage. It's about building your human capital first.
Okay, I see. So instead of putting that small amount into the market, you put it into skills or learning that could increase your income potential down the line.
Precisely. And the numbers they use to illustrate the impact are really quite compelling. The sources suggest that this kind of focused self-investment can lead to truly exponential salary growth. They give an example. Someone could potentially see their income jump from, say, 25,000 units a month to maybe 125,000 units a month in just 3 to 4 years.
Wow, that's a five-fold increase in just a few years.
Exactly. Think about the growth rate that represents. It's roughly 70% per year. Now compare that to the typical stock market returns we mentioned, averaging around 12%. This self-investment lever is potentially much, much more powerful for wealth creation early on. It often gets overlooked because it doesn't fit that traditional picture of investing money in stocks or bonds.
And they also mentioned something about how long it takes to learn a skill, right? Challenging that 10,000-hour idea.
Yes, that's another fascinating point they make, challenging a common misconception about skill acquisition, the 20-hour rule. We often hear about Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000-hour rule, that idea that mastery takes about a decade of focused practice. But the sources argue that to become good at something good enough to significantly impact your career and income, it takes only 20 hours.
Only 20 hours?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, 20 focused hours. It means you don't necessarily need to dedicate years to learn a new skill for it to be genuinely useful. They give a practical example. Improving English-speaking skills for someone whose career might be held back by it. For many people, just 20 focused hours of practice, maybe some coaching or dedicated study, could be genuinely life-changing. It could open up new job opportunities, improve networking, significantly boost earning potential. It's about targeted improvement to fix a weakness or gain a high-demand skill, not necessarily becoming a world-class master overnight.
Well, that's a really profound shift in perspective. Okay, let's make this concrete. Can we walk through that example comparing the traditional SIP route versus this self-investment strategy?
Absolutely. The sources lay out 2 scenarios that really highlight this opportunity cost we've been talking about.
Okay, scenario 1. The standard advice, the SIP focus. Let's say you start a 2,000-unit SIP. You invest that amount faithfully every single month for 5 years. And let's assume you get a pretty decent 15% annual return on it. By the end of those 5 years, today, you'd have accumulated roughly 150,000 units of currency, which is, a nice start, a solid foundation. And it definitely builds that financial discipline. No argument there.
Right. Now, contrast that with scenario 2, the self-investment focus. In this scenario, for those same 5 years, you decide not to put that 2,000 units into an SIP. Instead, you pour that time, maybe that money, into learning, upskilling, developing yourself. Maybe taking those 20-hour sprints to master new software or networking like crazy to understand industry trends. And let's say as a direct result of that focus, your salary jumps significantly. It reaches 150,000 units of currency per month.
Okay, a huge leap in income because of the self-investment.
Exactly. Now, from this much higher salary, you start investing. If you now invest 50,000 units per month from this new income, well, you'd cover the entire 150,000 units accumulated in scenario 1 in just 4 months.
4 months versus 5 years. That's incredible.
It is, and it gets even more impactful over the longer term. If you continue that larger SIP, 50,000 units per month for 20 years, the result is a staggering 65 million units of currency. And if you add just 5 more years to that, making it 25 years total, that figure nearly doubles again to 135 million units. That's the power of compounding, working on a much, much larger base, a base created by that initial focused self-investment.
So the takeaway here is really clear then.
It really is. It vividly reinforces that key point from our sources. At every stage of your career, you have to think about the best use case of your money. And for people early in their careers, maybe on lower salaries, the best use of your savings is not the stock market or mutual funds in small amounts. The best use of your savings is your personal development. The sources wisely call this period, this opportunity to really invest heavily in yourself without massive external responsibilities, a luxury. It's a luxury that becomes much harder to find as life goes on. As you get older, your time gets squeezed by family, mortgages, other commitments. Dedicated self-improvement becomes a lot more challenging. So making that strategic investment in your earning capacity early on, that's just good common sense, according to these sources.
It really makes you think. So the question for you, our listener, is, are you strategically investing in yourself right now? Are you building that larger foundation for future wealth? Or are you maybe missing out on that potentially huge opportunity cost by focusing only on smaller, less impactful financial investments at this stage of your journey? Okay, moving on from personal growth and accelerating your own income. Let's zoom out a bit. Let's explore the fundamental difference in how wealth is actually created at a systemic level. This is a big one, and it might just shift your perspective on what really drives economic prosperity and significant wealth accumulation.
Yes, our sources lay out a core assertion here, and they state it very emphatically. Businesses build wealth. Jobs don't build wealth, at least not in the same fundamental way. Now, this isn't saying you can't make good money from a job, save diligently, invest wisely, and live very comfortably. Of course you can. But the mechanism for large-scale wealth creation, for exponential growth, is fundamentally different when you compare having a job to owning or building a business.
Okay, so break that down for us. What's the core difference?
Well, let's contrast them. In a job, your salary is almost always directly linked to your time.
Right.
You trade your hours, your skills, your effort for a predetermined compensation. If you work, you get paid. If you don't work, you generally don't get paid. And as the sources point out, an individual is fundamentally limited. You only have 24 hours in a day, which makes earning money directly against your own time probably the worst way of making money if your ultimate goal is truly significant and exponential wealth accumulation. You just can't scale your income beyond your personal capacity, your available hours, or the limits of what someone will pay you per hour or per year.
Right, you hit a ceiling based on your own time. So how do businesses overcome that?
Businesses operate on a totally different principle. They thrive on scalability. They aren't limited by one person's time. They can hire multiple employees. Let's say a business employs 100 people. If each works 8 hours, that business generates 800 hours of productive work per day. That's a massive multiplication of effort and output. And businesses generally aim to extract significantly more value from an employee's work than what they pay them in salary, maybe 10 times as much, as the sources suggest. And crucially, they take the profits generated from that collective effort and reinvest them back into the business for expansion, for new products, for gaining more market share. This reinvestment fuels even more growth. It's a cycle.
Okay, so scalability through hiring and reinvesting profits. Is there anything else? You mentioned leverage earlier.
Exactly. That's the other incredibly powerful tool businesses have, which individuals and jobs typically don't have access to in the same way. Financial leverage. Businesses can not only reinvest their profit, but also expand their business by taking loans from banks. They can borrow significant amounts of money and then strategically use the future cash flows generated by their expanded operations to repay those loans. This powerful leverage allows business owners to grow their enterprise exponentially, much faster than relying solely on profits. It effectively allows them to earn profit even while he's sleeping, which is a fundamental difference, isn't it? While a salaried employee's income stops when they stop working, a business owner can generate profit through the scaled efforts of others and through strategic financial expansion, an option generally not available to a salaried employee. This is a key reason why entrepreneurship can lead to significant wealth.
That concept of scalability is key. Can you give us that Zomato example again? It really made it clear.
Sure. It's a striking illustration from the sources. Imagine a popular food delivery platform, let's say Zomato, handling a massive 1.3 million orders every single day. Now, imagine if they decide to add just one extra unit of currency, just one single rupee or dollar, as an additional processing fee to each order. Just by doing that, they would instantly generate an extra 1.3 million units of currency per day.
Wow.
And here's the real kicker, as the sources point out. This happens without hiring a single extra person, without hiring an extra driver, without extra investment in physical infrastructure. That's the sheer, almost mind-boggling power of scalability in action. A tiny change multiplied by an enormous volume creates significant, almost passive wealth. It's not about working harder, it's about the structure, the system, the scale.
So that really shows the wealth creation cycle.
Yes, it illustrates the broader economic engine. Businesses produce goods and services that people need or want. They hire employees who earn salaries. Those employees then become customers, using their salaries to buy the goods and services, which fuels the businesses further. But the true substantial wealth in this system, the sources argue, is primarily created by those who own and build the means of production, the businesses themselves. They create the value, manage the capital, and ultimately reap the rewards of that scale.
And this links back to the idea of equity, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What's fascinating here is that our sources emphasize that ultimately, wealth in its largest, most sustainable form will be built from equity. This basically means you have two main paths. Either you build your own business, creating your own equity, owning a piece of that scalable wealth-generating machine, or you strategically invest in someone else's equity. Think about it. When you buy shares in a publicly traded company, say Reliance or Apple, you're effectively participating in the efforts and the wealth created by that massive enterprise. You benefit from their growth, their profitability, their scale without having to build it all yourself. You become a part owner, leveraging their scale and their equity.
That makes sense. Build your own or buy into someone else's.
Exactly. And to put it another way, the sources use this great analogy of a savvy local expert, like a Desi uncle property dealer.
Yeah.
This individual uses their deep market knowledge, which is a direct result of self-investment in their expertise, right? They've learned the market. They use that knowledge to connect buyers and sellers. They earn a commission, often a pretty substantial one, with relatively minimal direct time investment in that specific deal. Now, it might look almost effortless when they close a deal, but it's built on a foundation of prior knowledge, strong networking, understanding market dynamics. This really exemplifies identifying opportunities beyond a typical job structure. Their expertise, honed through self-investment, becomes a form of leverage. It allows them to generate income that isn't strictly tied hour for hour to their work. They've essentially built a system or reputation that lets them scale their income beyond their direct personal labor.
So what's really fascinating here is, even if you're currently in a traditional job, just understanding this fundamental distinction, how jobs versus businesses create wealth, can profoundly shift how you approach your own finances, how you look for opportunities. It's about recognizing where the real engines of wealth are in our economy and figuring out how you can participate, either by eventually building your own engine or by strategically investing in the equity of others.
Right. Now, we've talked about building wealth, accelerating income through self-investment, understanding the power of equity. Let's pivot to something arguably even more critical. How do you protect the wealth you're building? Because, as our sources really hammer home, unforeseen events, a job loss, a health crisis, can, sometimes in a single blow, wipe out years of hard work, or even a lifetime of income, leaving you in a much worse spot than when you started.
This brings us squarely to what the sources call the non-negotiable aspects of financial security. These are the foundations. And they emphasize these measures as absolutely essential, particularly because of rising job insecurity. We see thousands being laid off globally, AI, automation, economic shifts. A critical point highlighted is that in many places, like India, as mentioned in the source, there's no severance pay law or inadequate social safety nets. This means individuals are often completely on their own if they lose their job or face a sudden crisis. This lack of external support makes personal financial preparedness, especially having liquid emergency funds and adequate insurance, absolutely vital. You just cannot build a fortune on shaky ground.
That's a sobering thought, but very realistic. Okay, so the first pillar you mentioned is the emergency fund. How much should someone aim for?
Yeah.
And maybe more importantly, where should they keep it? It can't just be sitting under the mattress, right?
Right. For salaried employees, the clear recommendation is a minimum of 6 months' worth of your total living expenses. And that must include all your fixed monthly payments, like loan EMIs, everything. For freelancers or anyone with variable income, a larger cushion is strongly advised, typically 12 months of living expenses. That's because their income is inherently less predictable. This fund is absolutely crucial. It's what covers your family obligations, keeps you from defaulting on loans, and stops you from having to take on high-interest debt if your income suddenly stocks or drops due to job loss, a medical issue, or anything unexpected.
6 to 12 months of expenses. And where should that money actually sit?
This is critical. Our sources state very clearly that this fund should not be in stocks or mutual funds. Why? Because of the market risk and volatility. The money in your emergency fund needs to be safe and easily, almost instantly, accessible when you need it. You can't risk it losing value right when disaster strikes. So the recommended options are things like low-risk liquid mutual funds, which currently offer maybe 6-7% returns, or alternatively, fixed deposits, FDs, which in some current market conditions might even offer slightly higher returns. The absolute priority here is liquidity, easy access, and capital preservation, not chasing aggressive growth. Safety first.
You mentioned earlier, the sources actually point to some modern financial tools that fit this need.
Yes, exactly. They highlight how the financial landscape is evolving. They mention a specific example of a fintech company that transitioned into a small finance bank. And this institution offers, for instance, savings accounts that pay 100% of the central bank's prevailing lending rate, the repo rate. So it's transparent, competitive, and moves with the market. Crucially, the interest is often credited daily, and there are no hidden conditions or minimum balance requirements. It's a true zero-balance account.
So your emergency cash can be safe, but still earning something decent.
Precisely. And furthermore, this type of institution might offer very attractive interest rates on fixed deposits, like 8.5% for a 1.5-year term, available to everyone, not just senior citizens. That makes it an excellent option for parking that emergency fund securely while earning a good return. And importantly, deposits up to a significant threshold, like 5 lakh in the Indian context mentioned, are insured by a government-backed body like the DICGC. That adds a vital layer of security. Plus, the account opening process is often entirely digital, making it super convenient and accessible. It's presented as a smart, strategic place to keep that emergency fund safe and working for you, albeit conservatively.
Okay, emergency fund sorted. Moving beyond savings, let's talk insurance, starting with health insurance. Our sources are incredibly blunt here. They say one medical bill can destroy your entire wealth and ruin your family. That's terrifying.
It is terrifying, but it's not an exaggeration, sadly. The sources share a truly heartbreaking, sobering story about a taxi driver, the main earner for his family. First, he tragically lost his father. Then he himself almost died from a severe case of COVID, followed by a complication like black fungus. The medical costs ballooned to a staggering 5.5 million units of currency, 55 lakh.
5.5 million.
Yes. And because he presumably lacked adequate health insurance, this unforeseen medical catastrophe forced him to sell his house, his biggest asset. He lost his job. And even today, he's still burdened with repaying substantial loans taken out just to cover those medical bills. His quality of life plummeted. His family was plunged into deep financial distress. This story just vividly, painfully illustrates the devastating domino effect that unexpected medical bills can trigger if you don't have robust health insurance covering every single member of your family. As the source starkly puts it, illnesses and accidents happen without warning, making comprehensive health insurance not just a good idea, but a non-negotiable shield protecting your entire financial life.
A powerful reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the other key insurance? Term insurance. This is specifically for the main income earner, right?
Yes, term insurance is vital for the person whose income supports the family, the blood earner, as the source calls them. The recommendation here is a substantial cover, ideally up to 20 times your current annual income.
20 times. Why so much?
Its sole purpose is to provide a large lump sum payout if the unthinkable happens, if the breadwinner passes away prematurely. That payout ensures the family can maintain their financial stability during an incredibly difficult time. It allows them to perhaps build their own careers without immediate financial pressure, cover daily living expenses, and crucially repay any outstanding major loans. Think mortgages, education loans. It prevents the double blow of grief and financial collapse. It gives them breathing room. The sources also specifically warn against what they call bad policies, things like endowment plans or money-back policies that often mix insurance with subpar investment components and lock up your money for decades. They imply you need clear, pure term insurance focused solely on providing that protective lump sum efficiently.
And this all ties back to our initial story about Vaibhav, doesn't it?
Perfectly. His explicit admission, remember, neither savings nor insurance. That directly contributed to his wealthy people's disease. Despite the huge income, he had zero financial resilience, no protection against the unexpected shocks life throws at everyone. It just powerfully highlights that true financial well-being absolutely requires these robust protective measures alongside strategies for income generation and investment. Without these two pillars, the emergency fund and essential insurance any wealth you build is fundamentally fragile. It's built on sand.
So another critical question for you, our listener. Have you truly secured your financial foundation? Do you have that adequate emergency fund in a safe place? Do you have comprehensive health and term insurance? Or are you potentially vulnerable to life's inevitable, unexpected curveballs? Because this financial security, it really is the bedrock. Without it, all the other wealth-building efforts are constantly at risk. Okay, now let's shift gears slightly and talk about some of the stupid mistakes our sources identify, things that truly wealthy and financially savvy people apparently never make. This section is really focused on what not to do, particularly when it comes to debt and spending, if you genuinely want to build and protect your wealth over the long term.
Yes, and one of the most insidious dangers they break down is the concept of the flat rate loan. You often see these offered for consumer goods, tempting high-value items, maybe the latest iPhone, other fancy items, really meant more for show than function. The fundamental problem with flat rate loans is how the interest is calculated. Interest is charged on the original principal amount for the entire loan term. It doesn't decrease as you pay the loan back.
So even though you're paying it down, you're still paying interest on the initial full amount.
Exactly. Which means a loan that might be advertised as, say, a 10% flat rate can effectively be equivalent to a 17% or even 18% reducing balance loan, the standard type, where interest is only calculated on the actual outstanding principal. The sources put it bluntly. It looks like 10% is less, but in reality, it might be double the true effective interest rate you're paying. It's a hidden cost that traps a lot of unsuspecting consumers. The crucial advice here: always verify if a loan is reducing balance. Ask for the effective interest rate or the annual percentage rate, APR, to understand the true cost.
That is incredibly deceptive. It really preys on people not understanding the fine print. What about those high-interest personal loans? They seem to be advertised everywhere, promising quick cash for, holidays or gadgets.
Those are highly detrimental to any serious wealth-building plan. Our sources highlight that personal loan rates can easily range from 15–16% from traditional banks. And they can be an alarming 30–40% or even higher from those instant loan apps that promise money in minutes. This creates a fundamental, inescapable paradox for wealth building, as the source asks. If you want to grow your wealth by 12–15% through investing, how will you build wealth if you keep paying 18% or even 30% interest on loans?
You can't. You're losing ground constantly.
Exactly. It's a losing battle. You're effectively canceling out, or worse, actively destroying any potential investment gains by servicing this incredibly high-cost debt. And the marketing for these loans. It often directly targets those desires for immediate gratification. That dream vacation now, the newest gadget, showing off on social media, it pushes people into debt that actively sabotages their long-term financial health. Classic case of instant gratification winning over future security.
And what about the tools that make spending easier? Like buy now, pay later, BNPL schemes, and of course the ever-present credit cards. Our sources have warnings there too, right? Often seeing them as a gateway to these problems.
Absolutely. BNPL, while it's often advertised as interest-free if you pay on time, has a hidden danger. It creates this false sense of affordability. It encourages people to buy multiple things, maybe 3 items when they could realistically only afford 1, or perhaps none at all right now. Why? Because the cost is broken down into these small, seemingly harmless installments. This actively promotes what the sources call overconsumerism and keeps people in a constant state of low-level debt, juggling multiple small payments. Similarly, credit cards. Yes, they can be interest-free if you pay the entire bill in full, on time, every single month. That requires discipline. But the danger lies, as the sources warn, if you have poor discipline. Then, using these credit cards, you will buy all the things you cannot afford or did not need. So for people in their early career stages, especially before that financial discipline is really locked down and proven, the strong recommendation from the sources is blunt. Avoid buy now, pay later and credit cards altogether. They are tools that demand significant self-control. Misused, they become powerful wealth destroyers, not wealth builders.
Okay, so avoid bad debt structures, high interest, and tools that encourage overspending if you lack discipline. What about major purchases that often require loans, like cars? Most people see them as necessary, but they lose value fast. Are there rules for doing that responsibly?
Yes, our sources lay out a very specific guideline for this, the 2410 rule for responsible vehicle purchase. But they add a crucial caveat. This rule is really only for buying a car out of basic necessity, not for showing off or what they colorfully call chapripana, basically ostentatious display.
Okay, the 2410 rule, what does it entail?
Flu parts. First, you need a minimum 20% down payment on the vehicle's price. Put some skin in the game up front. Second, the loan term should be 4 years or less. Anything longer means you're paying interest for far too long on an asset that is actively depreciating in value. And third, the total interest cost of the loan should not exceed 10% of your monthly income. This keeps the debt burden manageable relative to your earnings. However, the ideal advice, the gold standard according to the sources, remains. Never buy something you do not need, and always buy depreciating assets in full, with cash, if you possibly can. If you can't pay cash right now, then the clear instruction is please earn money, save money, and focus on your career, then buy it. Don't rush into debt for something that loses value so quickly, especially when that debt itself is costing you a significant amount in interest.
So this really clarifies the difference between using debt strategically versus using it for consumption. When is a loan actually justified then? When is it good debt?
Our sources are very, very clear on this distinction. They state that the only truly justified loans are for assets that will appreciate or that will generate a cash flow. This is when debt becomes a strategic tool, a form of leverage used for wealth creation rather than simply funding consumption. This is what we call good debt.
Can you give examples?
Sure. A classic example is a car loan for a vehicle that's going to be used for a ride-sharing service like Uber or Ola. That car becomes a business asset, actively generating cash flow and income. The loan helps acquire an income-producing asset. Another prime example is an education loan. Why? Because it's a direct investment in yourself, in your human capital, which significantly increases your future earning potential. That's an asset that appreciates. You could also argue a mortgage for a sensible home can be good debt, or definitely for an investment property that you rent out and generates positive cash flow. These are loans that ideally put money in your pocket eventually, or significantly build your capacity to earn, not just take money out to pay for things that immediately lose value or are simply consumed. Making this explicit distinction between good debt and bad debt is absolutely fundamental. It's a cornerstone of sound financial wisdom.
What's really fascinating here is just how easily these tools that seem convenient, that flat rate loan for the fancy phone, the BNPL for a bunch of clothes, can quickly become a debt trap, especially if you're not fully aware of their true cost, their structure, and their purpose. So it prompts the question for you listening. Are you consciously differentiating between good debt and bad debt in your own life? Or are you perhaps unknowingly accumulating these wealth-destroying obligations disguised as convenience? It's a fundamental difference that really can make or break your entire financial journey. And we've kind of circled back now to a core theme that's been woven throughout everything we've discussed, hasn't it? This profound and often quite destructive impact of societal pressure on our financial well-being. It's presented not just as, a minor influence, but as a major stupid money mistake in itself, something that actively prevents genuine happiness and financial freedom.
It absolutely is. And it runs deep. It's very psychological. Our sources explicitly expose the trap of showing off. They explain how many people spend money, often money they don't really have or should be saving, specifically to show society, to keep up with the Joneses or their peer group online or offline. And in doing so, they fall right into that debt trap we just talked about. Maybe it started with that luxury car loan to impress the neighbors or those constant expensive dinners to fit in. The motivation isn't genuine need or even personal comfort sometimes. It's about seeking external validation. It's a sometimes desperate attempt to signal success or belonging, even if the reality is financial stress.
And the sources have some pretty harsh words about relying on society for validation, don't they?
They really do. They deliver a truly stark reality check. It's worth quoting it directly because it's so blunt and honest. Go ask your society if they will help you now that you've done everything to show them and are stuck in a mess. You did all this for society, so let's see who helps you. Sorry, but this is the harsh reality. That's why you shouldn't do anything to show society.
Wow. That's
incredibly direct,
Yeah.
but it drives home a powerful point, doesn't it? Societal approval is often fleeting. It's a poor substitute for genuine financial security, for that internal peace of mind. When the financial consequences hit, when the bills come due or the job disappears, society generally isn't there to bail you out. You relied on their potential judgment to make the spending decision, but you can't rely on them for help when it goes wrong.
That's undeniably true and probably something many of us can relate to feeling pressured by at some point. And this connects right back to the idea of overconsumerism too, doesn't it? But maybe from the mindset angle this time.
Exactly. It links directly to the consequences of overconsumerism, which we touched on with BNPL and credit cards. But here the focus is deeper on the underlying mindset. Our sources state that a constant focus on building a shopping list, always thinking about the next purchase, engaging in habitual overconsumption. This actively prevents individuals from focusing on building a successful career and wealth. It becomes a self-sabotaging cycle. Why? Because your mental energy, your focus, and your financial resources are constantly being diverted towards acquiring more things rather than building more value or security. Even when a salary increase comes along, people caught in this trap, their first thought isn't, great, I can save more, invest more, pay down debt faster. Instead, that extra money is already mentally allocated. Okay, now I can afford the bigger car, the fancier holiday, the designer wardrobe. It's a treadmill of spending that just accelerates with every pay rise, keeping them stuck.
So it all comes back to discipline and mindset, overriding even a high income.
It's the critical point that really ties all 5 of these wisdoms together. It powerfully reinforces the core takeaway from our sources. High income without financial discipline, without a clear mindset focused on long-term security, and without a strong resistance to those external societal pressures. It ultimately leads to a failure to buy happiness from your money. That Vaibhav anecdote we started with, it's the perfect, almost tragic illustration. Despite earning a very high income, his complete lack of savings and insurance, combined with what appears to be lavish spending driven by appearances and maybe a need for comfort, left him feeling financially suffocated. He couldn't translate that income into peace or happiness. Why? because his spending seems to have been dictated by external pressures and a lack of internal financial discipline. He let his desired lifestyle dictate his income needs, instead of letting his actual income capacity dictate his lifestyle choices.
It really brings it all together with that overarching promise we found in the sources. Making money is a challenge. Managing money is an even bigger challenge. That just perfectly encapsulates this entire deep dive, doesn't it? It's not enough just to earn a lot. The real work, the real skill, the real victory comes from how prudently, how strategically, and how intentionally you manage every single pound, dollar, or rupee that comes your way. It's about being proactive, not reactive, when it comes to your financial life.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Taking control.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, our listener? It means that true financial freedom, that lasting happiness we talked about at the start, it probably isn't found in having the biggest house on the block or the flashiest car to impress people you don't even know, or just accumulating the most stuff. Instead, it seems to be about building internal security. It's about discipline management. It's about making conscious choices that align with your genuine, long-term financial well-being, not society's fleeting expectations. It's about building a financial life that allows you to actually breathe, to feel secure, regardless of your specific income level, because you are in control. So today, we've taken a real deep dive into the true meaning of wealth, and we've uncovered that it seems to be far more about your mindset, about common sense, about strategic choices, than just the sheer size of your paycheck.
Yeah, we've seen exactly why that wealthy people's disease can bite even high earners. How unsustainable lifestyles, often driven by appearances and a critical lack of basic financial safeguards like savings and insurance, can completely negate the benefits of a large income. We also discovered that surprising power of investing in yourself first, realizing how focusing on exponential salary growth, especially in your early career, can potentially significantly outperform small early traditional investments. It builds a much stronger foundation for future compounding and can seriously accelerate your journey to financial freedom. We got that fundamental understanding of how businesses truly create wealth through scalability and leverage, and how that differs fundamentally from a time-bound job, recognizing the power of equity.
And we absolutely highlighted those non-negotiable pillars of financial security: your emergency fund, kept safe and liquid, and essential insurance covers like health and term insurance. That taxi driver story was such a stark, powerful reminder of why these safety nets are utterly critical. They prevent unforeseen events from causing complete financial ruin. And finally, we learned how to spot and steer clear of those wealth-destroying traps. The bad loans, like those sneaky flat-rate ones, or high-interest personal loans. And also the dangers of overconsumption, often fueled by tools like the NPL and credit cards when discipline is lacking, and almost always amplified by that insidious pressure to keep up appearances.
Yeah, this whole deep dive really reveals that the real battle for wealth, it isn't necessarily won just by how much you earn. It's won by how prudently, how strategically, how consciously you manage every single unit of currency. It's about making deliberate choices that prioritize your long-term security and growth over maybe immediate gratification or what other people might think. It's about building that solid foundation, protecting what you have, and then strategically growing rather than falling into these common pitfalls that trap even really successful people.
Okay, so to leave you with something to think about this week, here's a final provocative thought. What one stupid money mistake, maybe something we've talked about today, are you currently making, perhaps even unknowingly, that might be holding back your financial growth and your peace of mind? And more importantly, what one small, intentional, common sense step will you commit to taking in the next 7 days to start aligning your financial habits more closely with true wealth and your own personal happiness? Remember, the sources suggest it's not always about grand, sweeping gestures or radical changes overnight. It's often about those consistent, disciplined, common-sense choices that, much like compound interest itself, build incredible momentum over time.